The missiles that screamed across Ukrainian skies on October the 10th weren't just an attack. They were an announcement of a new phase in the war. Total bombardment of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, plunging millions into darkness and into cold. New NASA satellite imagery, shared exclusively with Sky News, shows the lights in Ukraine going out. But people are fighting day and night to get them back on. Over the last week, Ukraine has seen yet another bombardment from Russia. In just one day, Kyiv faced 70 missiles. It was one of the most significant attacks to be launched on the Ukrainian capital since the war began in February. Olha and her husband Ivan's house was hit in a drone strike.
Відчуваю те, що всі люди відчувають, тому що я знаю, що я не одна. Це якби я оце таке случилося, я одна. А як всі люди так страдають, всі люди. Ну що ж я буду, рятуйте, кричати. Кричи, хоч і лопни. Як усей мир і вся наша Україна голосує.
The country's energy operator temporarily announced a state of emergency as the attacks cut nationwide energy consumption by more than 50%. This is the high-voltage Ukrainian energy grid. It's a system of energy highways which transports electricity around the country. It connects to a wider network of lower voltage cables, the A and B roads of the network that take energy into people's homes. All of that is fed by nuclear, hydroelectric and coal and gas-fired power plants, amongst others, across the country. Russia had been sporadically targeting this system in the earlier stages of the war, but on October the 10th, the attacks intensified, marking a new phase. At least 20 attacks were reported that day, with Kyiv seeing several strikes. Power stations were hit, including a number of thermal power plants powered by coal and gas. This chart shows the effect of the October the 10th attacks, with output dropping from thermal plants in the aftermath of the damage. A closer look at one of these attacks shows that the Russians aren't just targeting the power plants, they're focusing on the vulnerable equipment which connects them to the grid. High voltage cables run from the plant through a substation which contains transformers. These transformers are vulnerable as they're exposed to the open air and full of highly flammable cooling oil. It's part of a wider trend of Russia targeting transformers. These points mark some of the attacks against them, which have come in waves since October the 10th. To find out more, we spoke to Antonina Antosha from DTEK, a Ukrainian energy company. Based in Kyiv, she told me about the wider situation and her morning.
To be honest, I woke up at 6 a.m. this morning because of the blast right at my window. When Russians are attacking Ukraine's power systems facilities, they do it in a very, let's say, sophisticated way because they don't target the generating facilities themselves. They target the transitioning facilities. So we end up in a situation when we can produce electricity, but we have no opportunity to transmit it to the households.
These images from NASA satellites, shared exclusively with Sky News, show how the lights have gone out across Ukraine. These high-resolution images show nighttime lights over Kyiv in January, before the war started. The capital went dark following Russia's invasion as Kyiv came under direct assault. And Russia's recent attacks on Ukraine's energy grid have caused light levels to drop even lower. Many suburban areas have gone almost entirely dark, either as a result of being cut off from the grid or because national grid operators have prioritized maintaining power to central Kyiv. Sky News analysis of the satellite data found that 2 months after the attacks, some outer suburbs are still 80% dimmer than they were in September. We can map that data to show the difference. Decreases in light levels are marked in red, increases in pink. The average Ukrainian city saw its lights dim by half. One such city was Lviv, far from the war's front lines. A close analysis of satellite imagery from the attacks on Lviv suggests a deliberate targeting of the city's energy infrastructure. On October the 10th, Russia attacked the transformer outside Burshtyn power station, which supplies energy to much of Lviv. On the same day, Russia also targeted the Sakidna transformer, which allows Bushtin's electricity to enter Ukraine's ultra-high voltage cross-country grid. 3 other high-voltage transformers around Lviv were also attacked during the same wave, in a clear attempt to overwhelm the city's grid. For engineers at Ukrainian power companies like DTEK, it is a relentless test of their speed and creativity. But they also need help, and they've appealed to the international community for energy solutions to help them get through this winter and the next one. That's what they're getting here at a matchmaking event in Manchester. It's trying to pair British manufacturers and what they can offer with what Ukraine needs.
We're really looking forward to the discussions which will take place.
It's a long way from Kyiv. The conversations here have and will translate into direct action on the ground, with the Ukrainian government and energy operators speaking directly to companies. Stuart Broadley is the chief executive of the Energy Industry Council, the industry association for British energy manufacturers. He says that Ukraine's Soviet infrastructure makes the challenge harder.
The engineering drawings associated with those parts and the supply chains associated with those parts are not available to EU or UK companies. So they're going to have to be either reverse engineered, and that'll, to get their parts and to get them designed and get them to meet the specification and supplied, probably a year.
One of those companies is Wilson Power Solutions. They're based in Leeds and make exactly the sort of large transformers that Ukraine so desperately needs. The problem is that it takes at least 11 months to make one, so decisions need to be made now.
It's absolutely fair to say that the Russians are aware that the infrastructure that they're destroying is on a long lead time, and unless we act now, we won't have those solutions a year or 18 months down the line. But equally then, as British manufacturing and British supply chain, we can look at what potential solutions we can offer to our Ukrainian colleagues to try and find shorter-term fixes to that as well.
As important as the long-term energy war is, Ukraine must survive this winter first. It's set up tents like this one, called invincibility centres, places where heat and electricity is guaranteed, where people can warm their bodies and charge their phones.
There is no way Russia can plunge Ukraine into total cold and darkness throughout this winter. We have already actually started the countdown, because we do realize that we have only 108 days left until this winter is over. And then we get such a gigantic step closer to victory, because this winter is the last thing that Russia's dictator named Putin has at stake, and he will never succeed.
In the meantime, they are taking the smaller steps too. Some underground trains started running in Kyiv this week for the first time in 9 months of war, thanks to managing the energy grid smartly. The stations still serve as bomb shelters. But just getting on the tube is a glimpse of the routine, normal life which Ukrainians hope awaits once winter is over and the power is on. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.